do something similar, all of them, regardless of their party. So that was a positive story. The Cedar Rapids Gazette ran a similar story about Bob Ray and what happened back then and so forth. I think our little effort is starting to catch on. My guess is, if I were to predict, that as this crisis continues to develop and as more Americans see the dire situation these kids are in, they're going to respond in a positive way. You saw this list of 30 or so right already, and we may not have captured all the names because it's been pretty overwhelming of people wanting to help, wanting to even take kids in their home for the short of a long time. I think that's really what America's all about in the Quad Cities. Not everyone feels that way, believe me. There are dissenters out there, some of it do based on ignorance, some of it based on fear, some of it are just haters. I mean, unfortunately, society's pretty divided today and polarized, but hey, that's fine. Unfortunate that's the way they believe, but we as a group have started this rolling. We're going to stay the course, and we're going to try to help respond in a positive way to the needs of children. We just can't take our eyes off the focus here. Get all complicated, get all fed. This agency says that, that agency says that. How can we help? And that's what we're here to do. And I know this young lady, you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself. And if there's anyone sitting out there that's interested in helping in a positive way on this, sit around the table, because this isn't a tight closed club. It's sort of thrown together, it's loose, but my experience, that's how you do it. You got to get something going and then it grows.
The government doesn't have a lot of caseworkers and so on and so forth. Most of this type of work is done through grants and other contracts to people. Catholic Charities itself has some of those.
But it seems to me, Glenn, we need to provide them with the agency professionals, social workers, counselors, healthcare. We've got several of them here today that said we've got all this in place. They don't know what Davenport has or hasn't to offer. We're a very sophisticated Quad City community when it comes to delivering social services, right? And so I think we need to make sure they've got that information to start evaluating if there's a site that can be found here or further out.
That's where I was thinking the focus right now, is that the site selection. I mean, we talked about Whitmire Center, we talked about Arrowhead Branch. Has anybody talked to them?
I think the Whitmire Center isn't large enough for
100?
what they're, no, it isn't.
They were unable to come up with.
There's a representative of the center. What do you find out, Cheryl?
Yes, we were taking it certainly under serious consideration, and when I say we, I'm talking about the Board of Family Resources, and we got the additional information after the phone call that was had Friday afternoon and learned about the volume that they're requesting. That's just something that we could not accommodate. Also, the unknowns are very concerning to us. There's so many unknowns, and we are concerned about the risk and vulnerability that might leave our current mission in. So we're certainly here at the table to continue to learn with the rest of you and be of whatever help we might be able to be of at this time until we have more specificity to the problem.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know we would be open to, present all the information over to the social agencies and kind of see where things kind of spiral from there and see if we can get some good information, good solutions. And
yeah, because I'm thinking that's the biggest group that gets together in town as far as social service agencies, I believe.
And that's community health care.
Correct, yeah.
Right, what's your position there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm the outreach and enrollment coordinator.
But there is who is the?
Bob Davis, actually.
Bob Davis holds a regular meeting of all the agencies where they kind of compare notes and where they are. And,
when does that come up, Roxy?
It's once a month, isn't it?
Once a month.
Friday?
It's the third Friday
Friday
of the month, I believe. So I think the next one is actually, might be this upcoming
Could be,
Friday.
yeah.
Actually, I think it's this upcoming Friday.
That's definitely a plus there, I would think.
I think an inventory is a really important point, looking at what kind of capacity does this community have and for what numbers of young people. I won't speak for all the other social service agencies here, but we certainly are at a pretty tight capacity right now with our funding and those that we're trying to serve and meet the needs within our community. So really looking at if we had a surge of additional young people who come to us with some very, very complicated issues, what's our current capacity to step forward and help? knowing that there would be some potential federal dollars there. And maybe some key questions that we would want to pose to that particular group. One being, translation services, some real critical pieces, the medical, mental health services. How many therapists do we have that could accommodate the kind of needs that these children are coming with, and what age groups? Those would be some real critical questions. I think that group could probably walk away and, if they don't have the answer there, gather that and come back together with it pretty quickly.
Facilities, again, I think bureaucracies have a way of changing. They may say, oh, well, we can't find enough facilities. How many people in your community will open their homes to a couple of children on a temporary basis? So I would like to put a shout out, a request that, anyone that hears about this, send us an email saying, yeah, there's some 30 here did already, and maybe if 30 places, not if they're all in Davenport and look that close, or the Quad Cities, but in 2 apiece, that's 60 kids. I mean, if every city does a little bit, every community does what they can, it makes a big difference. When you got 18,000 communities across the country, a few taken by every city doesn't put such an unbearable strain on our social service delivery or schools or whatever. Anyway, so that I would...
So what would be involved in people that are volunteering now to get them in a position where they would be licensed foster people? What is that process?
It's quite lengthy. It's about 110 hours of training, and to become a foster parent after you've passed, some basic eligibility requirements as a foster parent, and then the training sets in.
I understand where you're coming from, Bill, but I would not start that list, because just from the standpoint that, again, families that are or parents that are foster parents, whatever, have gone through this training, and I would hate to start to think that we've got a list of people out there that are willing to take in any child somewhere along the line. And I know that that's not your point, but I just think I think that's a little bit ahead of
That's not what I'm
the game.
saying. They got to get a list, have them checked out.
Yeah.
If you're in a cage down in Texas and you're 4 or 5 years old, you don't want to be in that cage real long while we figure out this complicated thing.
I understand where you're coming from, but that process needs to be moved forward with great caution.
Right. But I'm thinking that people that are caring about children, and to their mind now, may be people that could be potential foster parents, and they need to think we have children everywhere that have needs, and so perhaps this is the time for people that's hearts are open right now to start thinking about the possibility of becoming foster parents, particularly for teenage children.
It's almost a platform, as well as this is a huge platform for immigration reform, as we all know. I mean, this could be a really
I agree.
continuing.
Be providing attorneys, legal help for the children, and that's a no. That if we want the children to have legal services, that's going to depend on us finding legal services for them.
There's a lawsuit that was just filed last week in the court out of Seattle on behalf of these children because they didn't provide them with access to legal representation. So that's something that really needs to be considered. If once we get things rolling, if some of you would care to join me, I would be happy to speak with the law school at University of Iowa to see if we could get some students who might be interested in taking on some pro bono work. I can't guarantee that anybody would say yes, but perhaps we might get 1 or 2, or they might know somebody.
Go for it. We'll have that bank of competent, trained, experienced people available. If someone, this was in the Cedar Rapids Gazette. I'm going to pass it around. You don't think there's some urgency here? That's a cage. It's an animal cage. That's what we're putting these kids in. Cut through all the nonsense. That's what they're passing around. That isn't me. That's a story out of the Gazette.
Cheryl?
We'd had conversation with the governor, and we had talked about, we visited Friday on the phone about some potential other sites that may be more conducive to the volume of kids that they're talking about.
I haven't. There's been some stories online that he's rejected the concept, but you know, I'm sure maybe it's early on, maybe he doesn't understand it, maybe he's still, you know, getting information, so, but apparently there was a meeting in Nashville the other day, and the president asked the governors to help out, like they did years ago, where Bob Ray stepped forward and was one of the few governors who did the refugees assistance for the Vietnamese. So I'd certainly reach out to the governor. Again, at the first indication is kind of negative, but he's still, first brush, deal with the media, you're liable to say anything and not really think it through. We all make mistakes. But, so someone that was, that you mentioned, the Toledo
The
facility.
Toledo Juvenile Home that just closed in the spring of this past year could certainly accommodate the numbers that the government is suggesting that they would need. There's other state facilities that have closed over time that might, you know, accommodate those kind of numbers. I don't know I don't know how the facilities have been managed in terms of upkeep, but Toledo has just been, you know, recently closed.
Feel free to write, send something to the governor. I mean, I should.
Well, I think you probably have more influence than I.
I'll call commercial realtors, but I don't feel comfortable about warehouses, but hey, if that's what they say, they're open to, if they're retrofitting.
Does anyone else want to take on the task also of looking around the area to see what might be available as far as facilities?
At this point, we would probably just welcome, you know, as you're driving around and you see something, tell us about something that we haven't, you know, because...
What about the fairgrounds? Is that,
Yeah.
no, not in any shape.
Looks like a shell, they're just a shell,
Yeah.
an open shell, and that's what we think about the Lulags. It's a shell, there's too much renovation that have to go on.
Right, I know.
Yeah, it's too small, I
I
mean,
was
some
thinking
of
maybe
them
an
are small.
exhibit building.
They do want them climate controlled if at all possible.
Yeah, your statement of it is, you know, we have heard generic statements. Easy to access within 50 miles of an airport, something that security can be provided either by fencing or other ways. Ideally, it would have plumbing to include toilets and showers, recreation areas and so forth. Try to, as you say, reach out, because one of the requirements is they want to co-locate the children with families of the same cultural heritage. Well, right now, we don't have any database to go to that says there are X number of Salvadorans, Guatemalans, or what have you in our area. So that's something else that we
I
know.
think last meeting we talked about getting some of the churches involved that have Central Americans worshiping in those congregations. That might be a good start.
And I will reach out to those that have.
If I could get the list of the churches, we can start from there.
Yes.
Have anyone thought about working with the local military? And the reason why I say a lot of things that I'm hearing that you need, especially about the sleeping condition. I know we use containerized units, and when I say that, don't be alarmed because those things are really nice. They have showers in them, and they're large enough to house 4 adults my size. So you think you can put maybe 4, maybe 8 children in there. You can put bunk beds in there. They have their own feeding units in there. They're really nice. And then you can take them and put them in place like down here at the, where we do the, they have the flower show. I can't think of the name of it. Like River Center. And you can put 100 of those units in there and care for 500 to 1,000 children in there with room to go. That's just something to think about.
Does anyone want to talk to the general at the arsenal?
I'll see him tomorrow.
About,
A separate meeting at 9:30, I'm over there for.
well, you might tell him to contact us then. Okay, here's the other issue. I am going to be going on vacation Friday until the 28th, so Nora, I'm not sure when she's going to be available. So I suggest that we don't set another meeting right now. Who can be the contact person that everyone can send their information to, can call with questions until we set up the next meeting? Contact person?
I'll do it.
Okay. And do you have a card or anything?
Yeah, I have cards I can pass.
Get to everybody, that'd be great.
I'd offer City Hall, but I'll be hassled for doing it. So I'm just telling you, there's no city money being expended
Right.
and so forth. So don't worry out there, folks, your taxes aren't going up because of the city. You know.
Well, I for one think we should be proud.
I do too. And I think it's
that we're
catching
doing
on.
this. Yeah.
It's, by keeping it in the forefront and not letting people forget that this is a moral imperative, it's a moral issue, eventually we'll get their conscience and people will, more and more will come forward. That's my prediction.
If I ask, I'm sorry, pardon me, Mayor, but if I ask that when you email me this evening, make sure you give me specifically what you're working on and what you've done so far. I have the information that was passed out by the mayor earlier, but just let me know specifically what department you work in and specifically what you worked on and whom you've contacted. That way so we can start building a database from this point forward. And also, if anyone have this electronically about all the personnel that are interested, so we can start building that database also.
Glenn, can you get that scanned and sent to him?
I would first talk with Jen. She may already have it in, she's obviously got it in at least Word format. We'll see if we can transfer that.
Okay. So anything that we've done so far, if we can get it to Byron, that would be great. Then when we gather information, we'll just set a meeting as needed.